So what if the hardest, most miserable work you're doing right now isn't actually building your future?
Right.
Like what if the fact that you just absolutely hate doing it is actually your brain's way of telling you that you are, well, actively destroying your own potential?
It's a terrifying thought, honestly.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we were looking at this idea that just completely flips our entire cultural understanding of, hard work right on its head.
Yeah, we're pulling apart this really fascinating conceptual framework today,
Exactly. It's from this document called The Founder CEO's Triple Mandate: Creativity, Delegation, and the Martial Art of Business.
which is quite a title, by the way.
It is. But at its core, this whole thing is a psychological blueprint. It's about how visionaries, and honestly, just anyone trying to build something meaningful, how they should allocate their energy.
Yeah, and the mission for our deep dive today is to really dissect how leaders lose their original magic. And, more importantly, how they can systematically protect it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the hook here, the thing that just grabbed me immediately, is this premise that building is never a destructive act.
Right, which is just so profoundly counterintuitive.
It really is.
I mean, think about how most of us were raised to think about professional virtue, right? We have uh, this deep-seated assumption that doing the grueling, uninteresting tasks is somehow a badge of honor.
Oh, totally. Like, I suffered, therefore I worked hard.
Exactly. We equate suffering with productivity.
Yeah.
But the argument presented in this framework is that when leaders force themselves to do uninteresting work, they aren't uniquely suited for it. They aren't building anything at all.
They're just coping.
Yes, they're merely coping. And that coping mechanism is, well, it's actively detrimental to the enterprise they're trying to lead.
Okay, so let's focus on that specific distinction between building and coping, because it really feels like the hinge this entire philosophy swings on.
It absolutely is.
The text suggests that in this, like, high-stakes arena of company building, the founder wears a ton of hats. But not all of those roles actually demand their personal attention.
Right, and that's where the danger lies.
Yeah, because when founders drain their creative fire doing these tasks that don't serve their unique visionary role, it leads to burnout. But the text uses a much stronger phrase. It describes a specific psychological state, self-hatred.
Yeah, that part is really striking.
It is. Like, why self-hatred? That implies something way darker than just, needing a nap at the end of the day.
Well, the psychological toll stems from the suppression of a core utility.
Okay, what do you mean by core utility?
So when you are a creator, a visionary, your brain is fundamentally wired to originate.
Right.
It constantly seeks patterns. It imagines non-existent futures. It basically tries to pull something out of the void.
Right, like conjuring something from nothing.
Exactly. So when you take that highly specialized cognitive engine and you force it to spend, say, 10 hours a day on mundane compliance or routine vendor contracts,
The word is...
right, or like optimizing an HR supply chain,
Yeah.
you are actively suppressing its natural function.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the self-hatred emerges from this subconscious realization that you are abandoning your true purpose just to perform basic maintenance. You're coping with the friction of a system rather than actually building a vision.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Isn't doing the uninteresting work just, well, a required part of being an adult, like having responsibilities?
How do you mean?
Think about a master chef, right? A chef who runs a kitchen with 3 Michelin stars. At the end of the night, if the dishwasher just doesn't show up, that master chef still has to scrub the pans.
Sure. Yeah.
Avoiding the uninteresting work feels like this massive luxury, like something reserved only for wildly successful CEOs who already have, an army of employees.
Right.
If you're building something from the ground up, you can't just refuse to do the dishes because it, like, suppresses your creative engine. That sounds a bit entitled, doesn't it?
That's a really good analogy, actually. But here's the difference. A master chef scrubbing pans because of an absent dishwasher, that is an emergency response.
Okay, fair.
The danger arises when that chef begins to incorporate scrubbing pans into their daily identity,
Oh, wow.
right? When they start convincing themselves that being covered in grease somehow makes them a harder worker or like a more authentic leader.
I'm in the trenches.
Exactly. I'm in the trenches with my team. But the text argues that this is actually a tragic failure of the restaurant's architecture.
A failure of architecture.
Yeah. Because while the chef is elbow deep in dishwater, their energy is being completely depleted. Their palate is literally compromised by the smell of industrial soap.
Oh, man. That's so true.
And their mind is focused entirely on removing burnt carbon rather than, developing tomorrow's tasting menu.
Right, which is the actual job.
Precisely. For a visionary, time spent on maintenance is a massive misallocation of a scarce resource. Only the chef can originate the menu. Literally anyone can be trained to scrub the pans.
Oh. I can really see the danger in romanticizing that maintenance work, though, because it's so easy to hide in the dish pit, you know?
It is incredibly seductive.
Yeah. Scrubbing a pan gives you this immediate, tangible proof that you did something. Boom. You have a clean pan.
Right, you get that little hit of dopamine.
Exactly. Whereas originating a new menu involves staring at a blank page, it's dealing with ambiguity and risking failure, and it's terrifying.
It's much less terrifying to just do the dishes and tell yourself you're being highly productive.
Yeah, you feel like a martyr.
And that is the exact trap of forced coping that the framework is talking about. It masquerades as noble leadership.
It really does.
You convince yourself that, micromanaging the payroll system means you care more. But in reality, you are failing to build proper systems. You are abandoning what the framework calls the apex role.
The apex role, I love that term.
Yeah, you're choosing the cheap dopamine hit of a completed checklist over the ambiguous, sort of existential terror of actual creation.
Okay, which brings us perfectly to the first of the three mandates, that apex role itself.
Mandate number 1.
Right, mandate 1. The framework designates creativity and innovation as the non-negotiable core.
Non-negotiable.
And it argues that this isn't just some secondary duty that you try to squeeze in on a Friday afternoon when you have a free hour. It is the spark. It's the absolute soul of the company.
What's fascinating here is how the text explicitly defines this. It says a visionary must originate. They have to see hidden patterns, imagine products that just do not exist yet. And I love this phrase, craft narratives that turn strangers into believers.
Craft narratives that turn strangers into believers. That is so powerful.
It really is the ultimate mechanism of scale for a visionary. Because innovation isn't merely tinkering with technology or crunching some market data.
Right.
It is the act of vision casting. You are seeing a reality that isn't there, and you are engineering a story compelling enough to convince everyone, investors, employees, customers, to literally walk into that non-existent future with you.
And whether you are pioneering a completely new tech sector or just reimagining a legacy industry, that creative engine has to run continuously.
Yes, because if it stalls, the entity begins to die.
Well, the warning in the text here is really stark. It says that a founder who neglects this creative engine risks devolving into a professional manager.
Yes, and the text frames that regression as a fatal error.
But wait, why is it fatal? Like, if the founder transitions into being a highly effective professional manager, doesn't the company just mature?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. Like, why is it impossible to just outsource the innovation part to an R&D department and have the founder focus on managing the existing success?
Because innovation cannot be outsourced. You cannot outsource authenticity or conviction.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, sure, you can hire brilliant engineers. You can outsource your legal compliance. You can bring in top-tier marketing agencies. But the soul of the company, that irrational belief that a specific non-existent future simply must be pulled into the present, that has to come from the apex leader.
So it's about the irrational belief.
Exactly. If the founder delegates the vision, the company completely loses its internal compass. It begins reacting to market trends instead of dictating them.
Oh, wow. I see that happen all the time.
Right. Every other function of the business, revenue, culture, survival, it all flows downstream from this creative engine.
So when the founder becomes just a professional manager, they stop looking at what could be and they just start protecting what already is.
Yes, and that is the very beginning of incumbent stagnation. You just become another slow-moving corporation trying not to lose market share.
And the framework stresses that maintaining this creative engine demands personal obsession.
Heavy emphasis on obsession.
Right. It mentions late-night insights and a willingness to chase ideas that seem entirely unreasonable to everyone else.
That's the key word. Unreasonable.
But holding on to an unreasonable idea, I mean, that seems incredibly isolating.
It's tremendously lonely.
Right. If every rational metric, every advisor, every market analysis tells you that your idea is flawed, holding on to it borders on delusion, doesn't it?
It does look like delusion from the outside.
So how does a visionary separate necessary obsession from just being recklessly stubborn?
Well, the distinction lies in the nature of the unreasonableness. If an idea is completely reasonable, well, the market has already priced it in.
Ah.
The incumbents are already executing it. The visionary's specific utility is to identify the gap between what is currently accepted as reality and what is technically or culturally possible.
Okay.
And living in that gap requires obsession because the friction of the status quo is just immense. The world wants things to stay the same.
So the visionary isn't just ignoring data for the fun of it.
No, not at all. They're weighing a different set of variables that the rest of the market just hasn't recognized yet. They're
Yeah.
making a bet that their synthesized narrative will eventually become the new rational standard.
But let's look at the operational fallout of that obsession.
Let's do it.
Because if a founder comes into the office every single week with a new, quote-unquote, unreasonable insight that completely upends the current roadmap, they become an agent of absolute chaos.
Absolute nightmare for the team.
Right. You have a team of people trying to execute a plan, and the visionary is constantly moving the goalposts because they had some late-night epiphany.
Yeah.
How do you prevent the visionary from accidentally destroying their own company through relentless, chaotic innovation?
Well, that operational fallout is the exact catalyst for the second mandate.
Okay. Mandate 2.
Right, because the founder must be allowed to be that chaotic, creative spark.
Yeah.
That unreasonableness is literally the only counterweight to the natural gravity of scale.
The natural gravity of scale.
Yeah, as an organization grows, gravity inevitably pulls it toward safety, predictability, bureaucracy. The visionary is the only thing preventing the company from becoming just another boring incumbent.
Right.
But, to your point, unmitigated chaos will shatter a company. The gears will physically grind to a halt. You have to build a system to trap that lightning and convert it into usable power.
So the solution to the visionary's chaos is Mandate 2, administration.
Build the machine and then
Yeah.
step back. Build the machine, then step back. This mandate covers the day-to-day machinery, right? Operations, compliance, execution.
All the vital stuff that keeps the lights on.
Exactly. And the argument here is that founders frequently stumble at this exact point because they harbor this ego-driven illusion that only they can keep the trains running on time.
Oh, it's a massive ego trap. And it's fueled by their early-stage survival habits.
Right, because in the beginning, they did do everything.
Exactly. In the very beginning, the founder literally had to do everything. They wrote the code, they filed the LLC paperwork, they probably bought the office snacks at the grocery store.
Yeah, they plunged the toilet.
They did. So they are conditioned to believe that their physical involvement in a task guarantees its quality.
That makes a lot of sense.
But as the enterprise scales, that deeply held belief becomes a fatal bottleneck. The founder's job absolutely must shift from executing the process to recruiting world-class operators who live for process, metrics, and efficiency. It's the difference between being the architect of a skyscraper and being the person checking the plumbing pressure on the 4th floor.
That's a great way to put it.
But I want to push back on the mechanics of that transition.
Okay, sure.
Because it's so easy in theory to say, oh, just hire great operators and step back.
Right, read a management book, do it in a weekend.
Exactly. But in practice, stepping back feels like losing control of the very thing you birthed. If the visionary sees an administrative process being built that feels even slightly misaligned with their original aesthetic or pace, the instinct is to jump back in, rip it apart, and fix it themselves.
The meddling founder syndrome.
Yeah. So how does a visionary founder actually practically execute this, what the text calls strategic liberation, without constantly sabotaging their own administrative team?
Well, the mechanism of strategic liberation relies on establishing parameters rather than micromanaging execution.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The founder has to protect the administrative team by giving them unambiguous mandates and then rigorously, painfully, refusing to interfere in the how.
The how.
Yes, you have to protect the operators from your own chaotic creative process. Think about it. If the visionary is constantly changing the operational parameters based on their late-night insights, the machine can never stabilize.
It's just constant whiplash for the team.
Complete whiplash. So the discipline of the visionary is to quarantine their chaos.
Quarantine their chaos.
Yes, you iterate wildly on the product vision, fine. But you leave the payroll, the compliance, the supply chain logistics completely locked in place. You have to let the machine run.
Man, that requires an immense amount of self-restraint.
It's incredibly difficult.
You are essentially asking the visionary to watch an operator solve a problem at, let's say, 80% efficiency, knowing full well that they themselves could jump in and solve it at 100% efficiency in half the time.
Right, and that's exactly what their brain is screaming at them to do. But the visionary's calculation is fundamentally flawed in that moment.
Why is it flawed?
Because they are measuring the efficiency of the localized task, not the efficiency of their overall cognitive bandwidth.
Oh, okay, that's a huge distinction.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yes, the founder might be able to negotiate a single vendor contract faster than the new head of operations, sure. But the cognitive tax of context switching, jumping from high-level product innovation down to haggling over a vendor negotiation, that context switch destroys their ability to execute the apex role.
Because it takes time to get back into that creative headspace.
Exactly. So by allowing the operator to handle it, even if it's slightly less efficiently at first, the founder is purchasing cognitive bandwidth. They are freeing up their own processing power to render those complex, high-level narratives that literally no one else in the building can render.
Wow. So the administrative machine is really designed to offload the cognitive friction of running the business, allowing the founder to remain in this state of pure creation.
That's the perfect harmony of mandates 1 and 2.
Okay, so we have the creative engine producing the vision, and we have the administrative machine executing it. That covers the internal dynamics of building a company really well.
It does.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the framework doesn't stop there. It introduces a third mandate that forces the founder to look entirely outward, and it's a much darker, much more hostile perspective.
Yeah, this is where the text gets very sobering. Mandate 3 is the martial role.
The martial role.
Yes, it is the requirement to prepare for war, even when you infinitely prefer peace.
Wow.
This is where the framework strips away all that idealized, harmonious view of business. We're just making the world a better place, and forces a real confrontation with reality.
Because building something significant doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Exactly.
Ah,
And it is rarely met with universal applause.
no kidding. The reality described in the text here is brutal. It points out that business inevitably involves legal battles, regulatory fights, aggressive competitive takedowns, public relations skirmishes, intellectual property disputes.
Oh, the ugly stuff.
Yeah. It argues that a founder who pretends these zero-sum dynamics don't exist is being dangerously naive.
Dangerously naive, and also highly vulnerable. The psychological friction here is profound for a visionary,
Why is that?
because visionaries are, fundamentally, builders. They are wired to look at the world, identify a deficit, and add something new to it. Their primary impulse is additive.
Right. They want to create.
So when they are suddenly confronted by destructive forces, say, competitors attempting to crush their supply lines, or regulators actively trying to box them into legacy frameworks, or critics just ruthlessly attacking their narrative, it feels deeply unnatural to them.
I can imagine. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece while people are actively trying to set fire to your studio.
That is a brilliant visual.
Right. And you can't just paint harder to put out the fire.
Exactly. But that is usually a builder's first instinct. They put their head down and just try to build harder. They genuinely believe that a superior product will organically shield them from hostility.
But you can't outbuild an injunction.
You really can't.
If someone is actively filing lawsuits to freeze your assets or launching a coordinated smear campaign to terrify your investors, going back into the lab to tweak the product design doesn't solve the immediate existential threat.
Exactly the point. You cannot reason with a destructive force using creative output. The framework insists that you have to cultivate a specific capability to handle these threats.
Which is?
A team of specialists dedicated to the martial aspects of the business.
Okay, I want to clarify what a martial team actually looks like in a modern corporate context, because that terminology, martial team, could easily be misinterpreted.
Oh, absolutely. Sounds like a private militia.
Right. We aren't talking about encouraging unethical behavior or hiring corporate mercenaries to, sabotage competitors or operate in legal gray areas.
No, not at all. The martial team consists of highly specialized professionals whose expertise lies in navigating conflict and neutralizing external threats.
So who are we talking about here?
We are talking about razor-sharp litigators, crisis communication strategists, competitive intelligence analysts, and policy lobbyists.
Ah, okay. The heavy hitters.
Right. These are individuals who deeply understand the mechanics of power, narrative defense, and regulatory warfare. They operate strictly within the legal and ethical boundaries, but they play to win in environments where the outcome is fundamentally zero-sum.
The concept of defending the narrative is so fascinating to me.
It's crucial.
Because earlier we discussed how the founder's apex role is to craft narratives that turn strangers into believers.
Yes.
So martial team's role seems to be preventing hostile actors from turning those believers into skeptics.
Exactly.
Like when a short seller publishes a 50-page report calling the company a fraud, or a massive incumbent launches a PR campaign mocking the new technology, the creative engine can't fight back on its own.
In those zero-sum moments, creativity alone is completely insufficient. The visionary cannot spend 3 weeks drafting legal rebuttals or fighting with journalists on social media.
Right, because then they aren't built.
Exactly. If they do that, they're abandoning the apex role. They're coping again. So the Marshall team is deployed to wage the war of words, strategy, and legal positioning across all those multiple domains.
They handle the conflict.
Yes, their mandate is to aggressively defend the perimeter so the visionary can remain focused on the future.
But hold on, if you have a team of corporate fighters roaming the halls, how does that not bleed into the creative culture?
That is the big risk.
Right, you can't just tell an attack dog to only bark at outsiders. If you build an internal culture that is hyper-focused on threat detection, litigation, and competitive destruction, doesn't that inherently poison the water supply for the creative team?
It absolutely can.
So how does a founder actually quarantine that martial energy so it doesn't turn the whole company paranoid and toxic?
That tension right there is the central challenge of the third mandate. The integration of a Marshall team has to be handled with extreme precision. Well, the framework argues that building this capability is prudence, not paranoia. The way you quarantine that Marshall energy is by clearly defining their structural purpose. They are a shield, not a sword.
A shield, not a sword. I like that.
They do not dictate product strategy. They do not manage internal operations.
They are an immune system.
The immune system analogy is absolutely perfect for understanding this mechanism.
Let's hear it.
You want a robust immune system silently patrolling your bloodstream, all right? Identifying pathogens, neutralizing hostile bacteria, dealing with microthreats before they develop into systemic infections.
Just keeping you healthy.
Exactly.
Right.
But you do not want your immune system attacking your own organs.
Oh, man.
If the Marshall team begins dictating how the creative team should brainstorm, or if the legal department starts vetoing every innovative idea just because it carries a fractional percentage of risk, you have developed an autoimmune disease.
That is such a stark warning.
It happens all the time in big corporations. The lawyers end up running the product roadmap. So the founder's discipline is to empower the Marshall team to fight external battles while fiercely protecting the psychological safety of the internal creative environment.
As the text says, it fights so the founder does not have to.
Precisely.
Okay, let's step back and pull all three of these massive forces together.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the complete architectural design that this framework has provided. We have the creative core, the paintbrush, the engine of origin.
Right.
We have the administrative machine, which captures the innovation and scales it efficiently.
Yeah.
And we have the Marshall shield, the immune system that neutralizes external threats to ensure the first two can actually operate.
That's the triple mandate.
So how does a leader synthesize all of these without tearing themselves apart?
The synthesis requires ruthless prioritization and, honestly, a deep, sometimes painful understanding of one's own limitations.
Self-awareness.
Yes. The most effective leaders do not attempt to master all three domains simultaneously. They recognize that their highest utility, the only thing that literally cannot be delegated, is the creative spark.
The apex role.
Right. They master the triple mandate by building robust systems for administration and martial defense, allowing them to remain faithfully dedicated to that apex role.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, they refuse to engage in forced coping, right?
Exactly.
They accept that doing the uninteresting work isn't noble if it distracts them from their unique contribution. They let the administrators run the spreadsheets, they let the lawyers fight the battles, and they return to the pure act of building something that did not exist before.
And they do so without the naive pretense that the world will organically reward their creativity. They acknowledge the hostility of the market, they prepare for it, and then they redirect all of their cognitive bandwidth back into the vision.
This framework isn't just for billionaire CEOs running massive tech conglomerates either.
Not at all.
The mechanics of this apply universally. Think about your own energy expenditure over the last month. Where is your unique value?
That is the fundamental question.
What is the specific thing that absolutely no one else can do in your project, your business, or even your household? Are you dedicating your peak cognitive hours to that apex role?
Or are you hiding in the maintenance work?
Exactly. Are you forcing yourself into roles that drain your creative fire just because you think it makes you look busy or responsible or like a hard worker?
It requires a brutally honest assessment of your own habits. You have to identify the tasks that you are clinging to out of ego or some false sense of duty.
Yeah, letting go of the ego is huge.
You really have to locate your own internal paintbrushes, machines, and shields, and ensure you are not using a paintbrush to fight a legal battle or using a shield to design a product.
Building a vision is an act of creation, but it cannot survive in a vacuum. It requires delegating the operational machinery, arming the defenders to protect the perimeter, and unapologetically returning to the work only you were born to do.
Beautifully said. And if the core premise holds true, that building is genuinely never a destructive act, and that forcing yourself to perform maintenance tasks you despise is merely a form of coping, then I would challenge anyone listening right now to conduct a forensic audit of their own time.
A calendar audit.
A calendar audit. Look at your schedule for the upcoming week, break down every single hour you have blocked out.
Just really stare at it.
Yeah, look past the labels on the meetings and analyze the actual cognitive demand of the tasks.
What should they be looking for?
Ask yourself, how much of that scheduled time is actually dedicated to originating, to actual building, to pushing the boundaries of what is possible?
And what's the flip side?
And how much of it is simply you coping with a chaotic machine you failed to properly delegate? Or exhausting yourself fighting a battle you should have hired a specialist to win?